right now, without further ado, if you all can remember, one of our previous speaker, Sucheta, actually discussed about the cooperatives for sustainable fashion. So right now, let me invite Bridgett Artise to help us to decode sustainable fashion. She is the founder of Sustainable Fashion Week US. She's from USA. So let me do a brief introduction. First, she reinvents, reuses, recycles her skills in new and beautiful ways as designer of Born Again Vintage. She is the professor at the Fashion Institute Technology, sustainable mentor, a fashion collaborator, YouTube teacher titled Vintage Expert by the New York Times, published author of Born Again Vintage, owner of House of BAV, and founder of Sustainable Fashion Week US. Bridgett Artise is responsible for creating one of the first sustainable classes for Fashion Institute of Technology. She has also been dubbed as ushering in upcycled clothing in our fashion world. I welcome Bridgett to share with us on this interesting topic of sustainable fashion. Hand over to you right now.
Hello.
Hi,
I'm
welcome.
so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. Decoding sustainable fashion, I thought that was a great topic for me of all people. And I am happy to go over what I feel are the most important things about sustainability right now in our fashion world. When I started in 2002, we only had two terms. We had green and we had eco-friendly. And you fast forward now, 2022, we have 50 terms. And that's just give or take. There's definitely more than 50, but we have over 50 terms to now define what we are trying to do out here. And to me, that has made things extremely complicated for the consumers, because my crusade and my journey is 100% about spreading sustainable fashion awareness. And so who am I spreading it to? I'm spreading it to the consumers that are either confused by it or really just don't know the definitions of it. And they want to, consumers really want to do better. I think that we have, like I said, created this pattern, holding pattern of constantly renaming and redefining a very simple solution. Because you have to understand that before sustainable fashion was introduced into our world, we were all a sustainable people. You know, it was something that was always very natural for us to, put a patch on a knee of a pair of jeans that we got a hole in, or take out the hem of a pair of pants that became too short. You know, we did this naturally because that was just the way we were as human beings. You know, something shifted, of course, when, fast fashion was introduced to our world. But at the same time, that's still who we are as people. So I think, I just wanted to go over briefly the 50 terms that we have now created in the past 10 years to describe what we've been trying to do to kind of combat the environmental damage that fast fashion has done. The first term is cradle to cradle. So, everybody that's on this panel, they probably know, most of the 50 terms. But like I said, who I try to impact, or who my talks usually refer to, are consumers that don't know anything about any of this, So, the first term is cradle to cradle, and that's the term that stands for the practice of manufacturing biodegradable clothes using raw materials that causes no harm to our environment, of course. And then you have sustainable fashion, which is the practice of creating a balance between manufacturing and designing processes to produce sustainable clothing options. Then you have cradle to grave, which is a term used as a product. It's tested for its environmental impact for the production to disposal. And then we all know what fast fashion is. Fast fashion is the process of manufacturing cheap clothes based on recent trends, and all these turn to waste once the trends subsides. And slow fashion, circular fashion, and eco fashion can all be grouped up in the same, but they all have different definitions. Slow is the sustainable fashion term, represents the production and the distribution of better quality clothes. These clothes last longer and have minimal impact on nature. Circular fashion is a practice of producing clothes and accessories to recycle them in the future, while eco fashion is a sustainable practice meant to manufacture clothes that benefit people and the environment. So now we also have fair trade fashion and vegan fashion. I think we all know what cruelty-free fashion is, and we definitely know what greenwashing is. So greenwashing is the process of creating a false image of the company. Now, and I'm going to stick there for a little bit, because that's definitely an area that we've had a lot of trouble with. So, in my history, like I said, been in this for 20 years, and because I go from community to community, city to city, I feel like the more we can educate these consumers to get back to really appreciating their clothes is where we need to really start. And when you have greenwashing, you have these companies that consumers love. And so they're glad that they're introducing these sustainable practices. Unfortunately, it's just, jargon, and it's just wording. They're not actually doing anything. And so we have to be really careful with greenwashing, because greenwashing are usually the bigger brands, the corporate brands that just want to kind of get in on the trend. And when you have consumers that really don't know the difference, or it's hard to distinguish who's real and who's not, that's when we get into a lot of trouble with supporting the wrong brands and the wrong companies, and they're not actually sustainable. Then we have minimalism. And minimalism refers to conscious consumption of clothes and the way people buy fewer clothes and wear them longer. So right now we are at 60% higher than 10 years ago on how much we're buying. So consumers are buying 60% more than they were just 6 years ago. And to me, that's scary statistics, because at that rate, there's no way we can keep up with the post-consumer waste. That's the part that gets a little tricky. So at number 13, I have recycling, which we know what it is. Now, upcycling. Now, upcycling is probably, and it's not just because my brand is upcycling, I promise, but upcycling is, to me, is the best way to be able to tackle post-consumer waste. And when we find out the statistics behind upcycling, we're only upcycling 1 to 5% of items that are going to the landfill. Now that is a huge issue, because we could upcycle at least 60% of that stuff. But for some reason, there is a disconnect on those clothes going to the landfill and those clothes reaching back to businesses and brands that could actually do something to it. So 1 to 5% is definitely not acceptable in regards to upcycling, because that, to me, like I said, has the most unlimited possibilities in regards to what we could do with post-consumer goods. And as somebody who has turned jackets into pants and pants into skirts and skirts into blouses, I know the potential of it. So it's not something that, it's hopeful. It is something that we could actually achieve. And like I said, to me, it's about getting to the issue of the disconnect and why we see such a low percentage of upcycling. Why can't we get more of those post-consumer goods to the people that could actually upcycle them? And at the same time, we are also, in the same vein of upcycling, we are also dumping loads and loads and loads and loads of clothes into African regions. And that's something too that is not productive for anyone. except for the people, of course, that are dumping it. But, the African regions actually have nothing to do with these clothes. Very, very small minimum of those clothes are getting used or put to use for things that they can be used for. Most of it is them trying to figure out where they have to dump it to. So that's another key part of this process that I feel that we haven't tapped in on yet. We need to be able to turn those pounds of clothes that are being dumped into revenue for these communities that need it. These are the communities that need it the most, but meanwhile, they're the ones that getting dumped with these pieces. So there's just a lot of disconnects in the whole sustainable fashion industry. And, don't get me wrong, because I have been in this for this long, I have got to witness the amazing initiatives, just like this platform. I've gotten to see and be a part of a lot of people that are doing a lot of amazing things. I just feel like that we might be in a slight holding pattern in regards to doing the same things. I just think it's time to maybe, ruffle some feathers, do some things outside of the box, so then we could push those percentages up. Because it's just, like I said, for me as an upcycler, it's really hard to understand a number like 5%. When I know that so many people know about sustainable fashion now, and I know that we have these big conglomerates that are now joining, jumping on board, and they're enlisting names like Kardashians and names that have all of this heavy weight. I would love to see all of that translate into a higher percentage. I think that panels are a great way to kind of hash out these problems and say things out loud. And then the next thing you know, someone on the panel hears something and it connects something else. And then we're working together, and then we're solving one of the problems. So panels are a really great way for solutions. But I do feel like we have some little missing holes that we definitely need to concentrate more on. But I'm going to continue down my 50 terms. And, and to understand in decoding sustainable fashion, the reason why I thought it was so important to be able to go through all 50 terms is because it just goes to show you that we have a really easy time defining things. It's really easy to put a label on things, but, how do we solve them? To go from two words in sustainable fashion in 2000 to have over 50 for the same exact things that we were doing 20 years ago is a bit confusing, and especially if you're not a consumer. I mean, oh, okay. I thought my mic got muted. If you're not a business or organization in the industry, I would get turned off if I had to research 50 different terms to understand what it exactly is. It would definitely make me a little harder for me to understand it, and why should I support it if I really don't understand it? But after upcycling, we have downcycling, which is the opposite of upcycling. That's the process that involves sending products to waste because they are less value and they lead to pollution. We have transparency. Now, transparency is another word that I would like to stick on for a little bit, because I think transparency gives us that amazing opportunity for brands to be able to prove that they are sustainable. I think we should utilize or make people a little bit more accountable with being transparent. And maybe we don't have to put it on the labels, but it should definitely be in every business mission statement on how their products are made and what makes their product sustainable. I think if we had access to that information easily, I just think it would be an easier choice for consumers. If I could go right on their site and I could see exactly what it is that makes them sustainable, how they make their process, their manufacturing, who dyes it, where the dyes are coming from. And sure, it would be a lot of work at first to get all that information, but once you have it, it's there, and then consumers can make the choice on whether to support or your business. Traceability is another one. Traceability is the ability to get information about the supply chain of a particular product, giving consumers an idea of its manufacturing history. So transparency and traceability are, to me, go hand in hand. And I think that all businesses should be held accountable for both of them. 18, we have carbon offsetting, which is the practice where companies take environmental projects like to balance the carbon emissions during production. You have living wage, another one that I could stick on for a few minutes. Living wage became apparent or became a big issue. A lot, of course, this was going on for years, but it really came to focus during COVID, because that's when a lot of garment workers didn't get paid, and then they started to voice their complaints via social media. And then a lot of people that never knew anything about garment workers not getting the right money now understood that, you have a whole um, a whole group of people that are making clothes that are not getting paid for it. And so by bringing the spotlight on garment workers and living wage, now we are starting to push the needle finally on getting these workers their proper pay wage. And it's a shame that we had to go through something like COVID in order for that to be highlighted, but that definitely brought that to the forefront. And now people are very concerned about the people that make our clothes. Once again, something that should have always been, but that's the way things have been. So unfortunately, that is something that I think that we are slowly starting to do better at. We're not there yet, but we are definitely now fully aware that this is happening. After living wage, we have organic fashion. So this sustainable fashion practice involves manufacturing clothes with the least amount of chemicals to reduce the environmental impact. I think it was a short film I saw a few years back when I understood the impact of dyeing our jeans. It was a village in India, and forgive me for not remembering the village, but it was a whole family that was walking around from head to toe blue from dyeing our jeans. And I had no idea that this affected anybody else anywhere, and until you see it, I have not bought a pair of denim ever since, and I just think if we had those little bit more of those visuals out there in the world, I also believe that consumers would make different decisions. I just don't think consumers have all the information that we do. This is our business, so we have to research it. We have to know this information, but I just don't think a lot of people have access to it. And so, like the saying says, when you know better, you do better. And I believe that if all of this information was out for everybody to know and was easily accessible, I just think consumers would make, better decisions. Then we have locally produced fashion, which is, definitely easily to define. We have fashion seals. Now, fashion seals are certification awards awarded to brands that help consumers, excuse me, quickly identify sustainable clothes. Sustainable fashion ranking, which is the same as the fashion seals, just as well as FSC certified. So certification is definitely helping with the traceability and the transparency. If you could get certified, that's amazing, because then that takes out of the guesswork for consumers. But at the same time, it is really hard for a super small brand to get certified. So, I think, you have these amazing initiatives, amazing things that are happening, but 9 times out of 10, it really only helps the bigger brands. And in my experience, as a person who's traveled from city to city and state to state, educating consumers, I really believe that the small brands are really the ones out there making the most impact. We're the ones that are spreading awareness and letting consumers know and educating them. And so, we should be able to get, or they should be able to get certified just as easily as a larger brand or corporation. Then we go into biodegradable cost per wear. Now, cost per wear is a metric used to evaluate the value of each wear of clothes. So for instance, if it's $1,000 for a shirt is worn twice a year, then the cost is, $500. So, that goes back to, the new age. It's a social media where, clothes are 100% disposable, because of fast fashion. And also the idea of trying to create something new every time you post something. God forbid you're seen in the same t-shirt twice, so you have to kind of stay on top of buying different clothes. And that's where fast fashion is catered to a generation that is solely about constantly reappearing in a different way, or setting trends up. So cost per wear, I think, comes in when we could teach consumers the value of clothes, and to go back to that place where we were years ago, when we appreciated our clothing. And clothing was made, a lot better then as well. But at the same time, we love that sweater that we got from our grandmother, or our aunt, and we wanted to hold on to it. We just don't have that same attachment to clothes anymore the way we used to. So it's really about, coming back to that and making consumers appreciate or have that connection to their clothes again. We also have rental clothes and resale now. Resale has turned into $1 billion business. My first class at FIT was how to build a vintage business, and that was in 2010. And at the time, vintage was, borderline. We didn't know if it was going to stay, or if it was a trend, or if, it was just a happening thing right now. And you fast forward 12 years and resale has turned into $1 billion business. So, it definitely shows you that, things that are trends can easily become what is and not a trend or a fad, but something that's more consistent. And I think resale is actually a great way to kind of reduce overconsumption of clothes. You could, there's definitely lots of different opinions in regards to the resale business, because it also allows people to buy more. So, it's really, a touchy subject, but I do feel like it is on the better end of things, because it does allow people to resell something as opposed to throw it out. Then we have dematerialization, which is a process in which the goal is to reduce the number of materials used in the design of cloth to cut down its environmental impact. Then we got the carbon footprint, we got overconsumption, which I think we all pretty much know what that is. And then we have the value chain, and that's a method by which companies tend to add more value to their products. And this is due through production and marketing of the products, and by offering after-sales services. So the value chain is something that I think is key, because I think, once again, it goes back to educating the consumers to reconnect with their clothing, to love their clothing again. So it's not something, and that's where, my brand, Born Again Vintage, I like to dub them as forever clothes, because they're one of a kind, because they're used with vintage, and you'll never see that pattern or that texture again, because it's gone. The silhouette is usually made so it could be worn a couple of different ways. It fits a couple of different sizes. So that's something that's definitely going to linger in your closet a lot longer, because it has a lot of different multi-diverse ways to be worn. And I realized that, probably by happenstance, not necessarily as a particular way I wanted to create. It was just the way that I actually happened to create. And so, but to be able to see customers constantly come back with the items, and, to show me the wear of it, and they still have it after 5, after 10 years, and how they'll never get rid of it. That is how we should be creating in mind, with knowing that our consumer is going to love it and is never going to want to get rid of it. We also have the GOTS certified, which means that the product is manufactured by a brand that meets the global organic textile standards. Zero waste fashion is using pretty much, there's no or little waste in your production, which is the way a lot of people create nowadays, is by having little to no waste, which is another great way to be sustainable. We have compliance, which I think we know what compliance is. We have the conscious consumer. Um, and in the conscious consumer, and just think that number is definitely, that's probably the fastest growing number. So that's something that should make us all feel good to know that more of us are becoming conscious of their ethical choices in clothing, and buying a lot smarter. So when you have a conscious consumer, 9 times out of 10, they're spreading that awareness to family members and friends. And so it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's the consumers that don't know anything about sustainability, and that I feel, like I said, that we're missing. The people that really need to know more about sustainability are the ones that aren't usually on a panel, or the ones that are at the mall right now shopping, and it's like, how do we connect with them? How do we get all of this information out, this amazing information that we've shared today? By the way, great speakers and great information today. How do we get that information to the masses, the ones that don't know anything about sustainability? And that's just been always my focus. And then I just have like a couple of more left. And well, microplastic and monoculture, tier 1 factories, dead stock fabric. Dead stock fabric is actually, not necessarily a problem, but there's definitely a lot of businesses out there that keep their unsold items sitting in a warehouse and just sitting. And these are the dead stock items that I was talking about earlier that easily could be upcycled. Um, so we definitely need to connect more to the people that are harboring these type of fabrics, so we could get some upcycling products back onto, and just put them into use, as opposed to sitting there, and not for nothing. Some of these companies burn them. They do a lot of things to them that definitely cause more harm than the environment than it does good. So, it's really trying to identify with the businesses that really need our help. And we need to connect with, to make that, make that connection, so we can come up with more innovative ways to upcycle and get rid of that dead stock. We have the paradigm change, secondhand apparels, B Corporation, modern slavery, which goes back to the garment workers, a green factory, LEED certification, circular economy, closed loop fashion, and last but not least, post-consumer waste. And I think post-consumer waste is probably, one of those, buzzwords that everyone understands, but I'm not sure if people understand how much is out there, you know. And we definitely need to have more access to those post-consumer waste, so we could chip away at that very, very low percentage of what we're able to do with that post-consumer waste. So until we really can address these issues where we're in the same holding pattern of environmental damage, I think that's when we're able to really start seeing some movement in those percentages that are still, in my opinion, very low. And I just think that, we're definitely stronger together. I think that we all have the solution somewhere in, all of this knowledge. And I think that, I appreciate you guys and platforms like this that allow us to, voice our opinions and and what we're doing, so people can know more about the different choices that they have in sustainable fashion. And I hope that I decoded it enough.
Thank you so much, Bridgett.